Hello, I'm Dan. I'm an iOS developer. I work for myself through a company called Knowledge is Porridge. It really is a stupid name for a company. So I want to talk about accessibility, or A11Y, which is how we abbreviate it. We abbreviate it because accessibility is really tricky. It's really hard to get right. So we've even made the word more accessible, which is telling, and we should pay attention to that. Here's the thing about accessibility. It's never part of our MVP. We never consider it early. We never test it, which is pretty poor. 2 days before we ship an app, somebody inevitably says, has anybody tried this in VoiceOver? And the answer is always, shut up. The other thing about accessibility is real-world accessibility is everywhere. It's the width of doors, the height of sideboards, it's braille menus, audio in tours. But we notice when that breaks because we can't not. The software we make is private. When it fails in homes. That's pretty bad. Good accessibility helps people who struggle to struggle less. So it's absolutely worth us spending the time on. So if you take anything from this, blah, 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 SwiftUI, if you take anything from this, whatever your technology stack is, accessibility isn't optional, particularly if you're a pizza chain. Okay, so SwiftUI is fairly new. It came this year. It's a declarative way of doing things. And it's really great because accessibility seems scary because the range of assistive technologies is vast. And you sometimes feel that you need to understand all of those things in order to have a good, accessible piece of software. But the truth is, just being good on your platform, whatever your platform is, makes for good accessibility. The web is pretty good accessible if you put the effort in. SwiftUI is very good for accessibility if you put the right effort in. So how is SwiftUI different to how we do it traditionally? And I used traditionally last year, because that's how quickly software moves. Traditionally, you'd opt in with accessibility. You would find an element in your application, mark it as accessible, give it some labels so that assistive tools could make sense of that. In SwiftUI, everything is accessible by default, which is cool. Your job with SwiftUI is not to add accessibility, it's to make what's there better. And that's a great starting point for it. Traditionally, you'd specify exactly where localized text was used, but in SwiftUI, that is automatically pulled from localization files where it exists. Great, less work to do. Traditionally, again, last year, you'd have to mark an element as dynamic in order to have it respect the user's scaling font needs. So somebody who's got low visual impairment will naturally pump up the size of their UI. We used to have to explicitly state where that happened. That just happens for free in SwiftUI. It's really great. And, most importantly, historically you built UIs visually. You would place things on screen exactly where they went, and that made you as the designer or the developer of that application make certain choices. It made you make certain assumptions. SwiftUI is declarative, so it forces you to think about the structure of your user interface long before it forces you to think about where things go. And well-structured interfaces are more accessible. So I get this a lot. What do you do? I make apps. Oh, I've got a great idea for an app. This time I do, we could have an app next year. Okay, so SwiftUI. You think about structure. What we want is a vertical stack of things. At the top, we're going to have an image. Then we're going to have 3 pieces of text. Then we're going to have a spacer that's going to push whatever's below that down. And then we're going to have a button. That's the basic structure of our app. This is the code. It's really small on there. Don't worry about it. What I'm going to do is highlight the bits that aren't boilerplate. We've got our vertical stack. We've got an image, which is YTF logo, with some sizing properties. 3 pieces of text. YorkTechFest 2019, a showcase of tech non-profit communities. Welcome to SwiftUI for everyone. Then there's our spacer. There's our button. And our button is a capsule, so it has nice rounded edges. And what our button will do is it's going to set a Boolean to say whether we should show the website to get our ticket. And when you tap that button, it's going to set that to true, and the associated sheet is going to slide up and the user can grab that. Doesn't really matter though. Here's the thing. If I can concisely describe that view to you, what's in it, how it's laid out, and what it does, then seeing it is secondary. I think everybody's probably got an idea of how this works now, and that is accessibility, because that's what assistive technology is there to do. So let's test our user interface.
YTF logo, image. YorkTechFest 2019. a showcase of tech non-profit communities. Welcome to SwiftUI for everyone. Get your free ticket button.
See if I can turn it up a little bit. I don't think it makes much difference. And this is our actual UI.
YTF logo, image. YorkTechFest 2019. A showcase of tech non-profit communities. Welcome to SwiftUI for everyone. Get your free ticket button.
Okay, so image, 3 pieces of text, button, nice and simple. What you're hearing is VoiceOver, which is iOS's screen reading software. It's also on the Mac and a few other things. And the bleeps between the words, so the user actually swiping through the phone in order to get to the next thing. It's important to remember that your applications, no matter what you're doing, what platform you're on, have multiple user interfaces. The ones we historically look at as we're building, and the ones that some people naturally have to use because of reasons, impairments. Okay, how does it work? So, SwiftUI produces what's known as an accessibility tree. It's a little bit like a DOM if you're a web developer. It produces a hierarchical tree of metadata that describes what your UI is and how it can be interacted with. And this is it for that app. It's got 5 things. Image, text, you've seen this stuff. It also has labels. And out of the box, that's pretty good. Now, you might not have heard it, but it named the name of the logo as YTF logo. That's not very useful to somebody who can't see it. It's got loads of swiping. There's 5 things to get through, and we can tidy that up a little bit. I'm running out of time, I think, so I'm going to skip through things a little bit. We're going to pull the code out for our button into its own little view, just so we can reuse that. We're going to put some accessibility into that, which is here. Okay, so we have a capsule view, and that's going to take a piece of text. That piece of text is getTicketCTA, which will just automatically get pulled from our localization file, wicked for people who don't speak English. And then we're going to update our view. Our view, we're going to say, okay, we don't want to call it YTF logo. That was just the name of the image, and I'm a lazy developer, so I'm going to give it a meaningful name. It's YorkTechFest logo. And I'm going to have my 3 pieces of text, take some values that will be picked up from localization. And I'm going to tell SwiftUI to hide them from the accessibility tree because I don't want to have to go through 5 different things. 30 seconds. Go back. Different one. 5 more minutes.
YorkTechFest logo.
Okay, so this is that.
Very sharp. Gift card. Logo other. YorkTechFest 2019. Get your free ticket button. Okay. You will be taken to the ticket site to get your free ticket.
So better, but not great. So by making the image more accessible, VoiceOver has decided that it can tell us more about the image. Like it's a really high pixel density, and that's great, but that's useless for this. We've skipped these other pieces of text, so that's no good for accessibility. And the button's better, but still not great. But that's our tree now. It's only 3 things. But we can do better than that still. So explaining the logo just duplicated the label of the app. We ended up saying the same thing twice now. That's pointless. The logo carries more information that we just don't need. We've lost the other pieces of text. And really, when we've got an action that a user's going to go to effort to access, and it is an effort, it's not as easy for everybody, we should explain the consequences of tapping that. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to add an accessibility hint to our button. We're going to just skip by that. We're going to declare our image is decorative because we just don't care about it in the accessibility tree. We're going to put our text into a vertical stack, which we've already seen. We're going to tell that vertical stack that it should just be treated as one thing for accessibility. All of its children should be combined. And then we're going to go through it.
2019, a showcase of tech non-profit communities. Welcome to SwiftUI for everyone. Get your free ticket button. You will be taken to the ticket site to get your free ticket.
And that's it. So we have 2 things in our accessibility tree now. We have all the text we ever want to communicate to the user. We have a button that has the label that the user cares about, a hint that will tell the user the consequences of navigating to it and tapping it, and it's taken very little effort on our part. And that's the point. It really doesn't take a lot of effort on our part. So that's my talk. Thank you very much. Cheers.